Hello everyone, welcome to my Batman Arkham Knight, Knightmare difficulty, no damage walkthrough. We'll be investigating the seismic activity on Miyagani Island, which is the result of Poison Ivy doing an early attack against the militia, and we'll also be doing some side missions as well. And a bit of a disclaimer for this particular part of the walkthrough. You're going to see a moment where I take damage, but I don't restart. It's during Firefly's side mission when we're chasing him through Founders Island, because the circumstances by which Firefly damaged me are completely bullshit. So this time around, when you're chasing Firefly through Founders Island, he has a lot more jetpack fuel, so the chase goes on for a bit of time. And the thing is that Firefly ran out of jetpack fuel. I got in range to do the takedown, and Firefly was also positioned right under a structure. So there was no reason for him to fire his flamethrower at this moment. But for whatever reason, Firefly chose to fire his flamethrower into a wall, and he was pretty close to this wall. The fire was on the wall. I did the takedown animation, and just before I touched Firefly to do the takedown animation, I took damage. There is no reason for that to be the case at all. It was so bullshit. And the chase was already done by then. And I would have just recovered my health had I just done a random combat encounter out on the street. I was not willing to restart that whole entire chase again because it's so lengthy when you're doing it on Founders Island. So that is why I am going to just completely ignore the damage taken in that part of the video and just continue from there. That is the disclaimer I want to lay out to you guys, and it was so bullshit. I was so mad when Firefly just did that for no reason. And I really should have gotten iframes during the entire takedown animation, but apparently you don't get iframes during that takedown animation when you launch out of the Batmobile. And the chase was already done by then. So what was the whole point in doing that whole entire chase again when I just caught Firefly right then and there? And I mean, this is a very different kind of circumstance to the whole idea of minigunners landing right on top of me and I took damage. Like, that right there is a different kind of circumstance than actually nailing the finishing blow on Firefly and taking damage in the process when I shouldn't have taken damage. I was not going to restart due to bullshit. That is what I'm going to lay out for you guys, and that's the only instance of damage you'll actually see in this video that was the result of bullshit. There's no other moment in this video where I take damage, and I hope this is going to be the same case for the rest of this walkthrough, so there we go. And we're doing a Penguin side mission right now. And we'll also be doing some other side missions with bombs and also with militia towers and checkpoints. And with regards to the bombs, I got some really interesting recordings for some of these encounters because some of the bombs I was dealing with were very difficult to actually no damage. But there were also some moments where I was just clutching it like crazy and I wasn't taking any damage, and I nailed one bomb on my first try. It was so exciting, and I can't wait to show it in this video. But that right there was pretty cool. But we now have this militia watchtower right here, which you're going to be seeing me use dive bombing once again. And I'm just going to take out this guy who has the jammer pack. And I'm going to take out that guy right over there. And then I'll initiate the loop with the dive bombing technique. And given that it's all pretty simple, and there's not much I really need to discuss aside from a couple of moments with the bombs, I'm just going to go on a different tangent. And I'd like to talk about a new game I'm excited for, Ghostwire Tokyo. Ghostwire Tokyo got some new gameplay, finally. It's been quite a while since that game has even been mentioned or even had any kind of gameplay footage. But Ghostwire Tokyo's gameplay looks very interesting. I was initially put off by it because I thought originally it was going to be a very similar format to Evil Within, but it's a first-person open-world game, and it has some interesting ideas for combat, and it has some interesting ideas for stealth. I just hope that it doesn't become another Dying Light, because really I'm just getting put off by Dying Light 2 at the moment. And I am still going to continue my blind playthrough of Dying Light 2. It's just I'm at a point in Dying Light 2 where I'm just busy trying to farm for XP and grind, because farming and grinding for XP in Dying Light 2, and also grinding for abilities, is made even more tedious by the use of inhibitors and with how little XP the enemies give you, and also with how buggy the XP system is, because at times you'll take out an enemy and you don't get XP, and it makes no sense. Like, the XP gainage is so inconsistent in Dying Light 2 compared to Dying Light 1. And I don't know why they opted for this whole kind of inhibitor system, and somehow injecting yourself with an inhibitor doesn't augment both health and stamina at the same time. You have to actually pick which stat you want to go for, and this only makes the whole farming and grinding fetch quest system that they're going for with this RPG design even more tedious. It's so frustrating right now, and it's such backwards thinking because Dying Light 1, there was one night mission in particular, which was part of the main story, where the game was permanently nighttime, and you could use that whole entire moment to farm for XP like crazy and build up a lot of cool abilities that just made the gameplay so much better because you go to Dying Light for the abilities, but when they just try to hide the crucial fundamental gameplay that makes Dying Light what it is behind the paywall system, and the paywall system this time around for Dying Light 2 is even more of a step process than with Dying Light 1. You're just destroying the whole point of playing Dying Light 2. Like, what were they trying to go for with that? It makes no sense. It's such backwards thinking. But just based on my initial impressions of Ghostwire Tokyo, when I saw some of the initial gameplay, it was not what I was expecting. And I'm not the type for open world games. I'm not really the type for a lot of these RPG style games. But I don't think Ghostwire Tokyo is so much RPG. I think there is a measure of skill involved. And, it's not going to feel so throwaway with its gameplay and with its story. I think there's some potential for Ghostwire Tokyo to be very interesting. Ooh, also right here, do you see this? The reason why I was able to do an instant takedown on that heavy and not have to do 2 takedowns is because I had the bat. Whenever you do a takedown on a heavy and you have a weapon, you will instantly take him out. That is really cool design. But as I was saying, there is some potential for Ghostwire Tokyo to be very interesting, and based on the gameplay that I saw, I think the game looks intriguing, and I'll definitely give it a try. And I just hope the world is going to be a lot more interesting than Dying Light. And I remember watching Under the Mayo's Dying Light video that he released recently. And, he did make a lot of the same kind of points that I made about Dying Light, about the characters and about the world, and with how dull the combat can be at times. And I really feel like Dying Light 2 is following a very similar trend. But I'm hoping it's not going to be the same case with Ghostwire Tokyo, given that it's designed by Tango Gameworks, the same people that made The Evil Within. And The Evil Within series is one of the greatest gaming series ever made. It is honestly a game series that I feel is better than some of the Resident Evil games, like Resident Evil 4. The Evil Within 1, I feel, is a better game than Resident Evil 4. Evil Within 2, not so much. I mean, Evil Within 2 was kind of a step backwards in quality when it came to the combat, but the stealth was definitely enhanced a lot more. That being said, though, the AI definitely needed a lot of work in The Evil Within 2, and there are some bugs with The Evil Within 2 that you don't really notice as much with The Evil Within 1, and then some changes with the movement style that they decided to favor with The Evil Within 2 make the movement very clunky, and it can lead to problems. And then with certain encounters like Chapter 10, for instance, like the very beginning when you're in that mandatory combat encounter, I could have sworn there was a moment in an interview for The Evil Within 2 where they mentioned that there wouldn't be any mandatory combat encounters, and for some reason they decided to favor that with Chapter 10, which I don't mind because realistically it makes a lot of sense, but I feel like because a lot of The Evil Within 2's fundamental gameplay revolves around the idea of not being forced to engage in combat, when you're put into that kind of mandatory combat encounter, the holes within the combat system really start to show. And then when they put in enemy types like the Hysteric, and the Hysteric is one of the most broken enemy types in The Evil Within 2, but at the same time, I still feel like there is a measure of difficulty with that enemy that makes it a very lethal enemy. And its health pool is pretty absurd, though. That's what I'll say. Like, it takes 3 explosive bolts, and it's still alive. So you need to use, like, 4 explosive bolts to get rid of a Hysteric, which looks no different to your typical Law. So why it has that absurd amount of health, I will never understand. But the Hysteric, when you put in these kind of enemy types that I feel are better designed for the open world, where you're not forced to engage with them, but then you put them into a mandatory combat encounter, you really start to see the holes present with these kind of AI systems. And that's definitely one of the major problems I have with The Evil Within 2. It's the combat encounters. The combat doesn't have the same level of polish as The Evil Within 1, whereas the stealth is enhanced a lot more in The Evil Within 2 compared to The Evil Within 1. That being said, though, The Evil Within 1 stealth is still equally as satisfying. It's just The Evil Within 2, because the overall designs really lean more towards the stealth side rather than the combat side, the holes really show in the combat. That's what I mean right there. Like, I'm not saying the game is bad. I still like The Evil Within 2 and its charms. I mean, it's better than Resident Evil Village, that's for sure. but it does have problems, and I really feel like they didn't devote the same amount of time to the polish of the Evil Within 2 compared to the Evil Within 1. So that's what I have to say about that. But going back to what I was saying about Ghostwire Tokyo, I am definitely excited for Ghostwire Tokyo, and like the whole idea of like these elemental powers and then these different enemy types. Like, it could offer something very interesting. I just hope it doesn't lean so much towards absurdities and just magic and the like. And I just hope, while they are embracing the magical side to gameplay, there is a level of groundedness to the magic that doesn't allow it to be so absurd or just serve as like Deus Ex Machina moments or just serve as a level of craziness that just kind of makes you not take the game seriously. That was just something that Dying Light unfortunately suffered from. They try to convey this very serious like story, but at the same time, it's juxtaposed with very goofy gameplay, just superhuman abilities, and they decided to make that a standard with Dying Light 2 when you're embracing like superhuman abilities, and that everyone is just like a metahuman at this point when they're using inhibitors, and it just seems very stupid and comical. And I'm just hoping it's not going to be the same case with Ghostwire Tokyo. That's what I'm really hoping for with that game, and I'm confident that the director knows what he's doing. And, I hope the stealth and the combat are on a degree where you don't have to resort to farming and grinding like crazy like you do with Dying Light or Dead Island in order to make the gameplay satisfying. Like, I hope they don't lock any kind of cool abilities behind, like, paywalls. Like, not just cool abilities, like, fundamental abilities as well. Like, if they lock fundamental abilities behind the paywall system, then they're just completely out of their minds and they don't know what they're doing, and it'll probably say a lot about what the rest of the game will be like. But just to actually like conclude what I'm trying to say with Ghostwire Tokyo, I am excited for the game, and I'm looking forward to it, and I think it'll be a pretty fun game. That's what I'll say right there. And like Shinji Mikami is at the head of Tango Gameworks, and I think he had some influence in Ghostwire Tokyo's development. So if he's involved, then most likely it'll be a really great game, and it'll be a game I'll definitely replay and do a walkthrough for. Of course, with the open world format, can you really have a difficulty though? Or is it a wide linear format like the Evil Within 2? Because then you can actually make a difficulty mode around that, because difficulty modes in open world games are never really that good. I mean, aside from the Batman Arkham series, of course, like Knightmare difficulty, New Game Plus difficulty, they're fun difficulties, and you can really notice some differences in enemy placements and their lethality and the like. So yeah, the Batman Arkham games do a pretty good job at putting a high difficulty in an open world format, but not many other games do the same thing as well, because like most of the time with open world games, it's more about like over leveling and grinding like crazy to just overcome the difficulty gap, which most of the time with these open world games, the difficulty gap is just being at the correct level to even do a fundamental encounter that you'd be able to do easily in an action adventure game. But that's just my initial concerns with Ghostwire Tokyo with its choice of difficulty. But there's a lot more I'll say about Ghostwire Tokyo when more news come out. But let's just focus on this encounter right now. This was a very hectic encounter. I managed to get this on my first try, and the close calls I had right here, like look at the number of close calls I am getting with these dragons and with these diamondbacks and these rattlers. It's rather absurd just how many moments I was able to avoid without taking any damage. And I think in some cases there is a hidden system involved where, based on the way the enemies actually aim at you, they aim in the path that you're taking, not directly at you. So I'm guessing because of the way I was moving, I was able to easily read the enemies aiming and then dodge accordingly, because they're aiming at the path I'm heading towards rather than at me. And because I was subconsciously aware of this, that's why I was able to dodge this many enemies. And also, the EMP blast is so helpful for actually giving you some breather to move around. And while it doesn't stun the enemies for long if you have only 1 bar of secondary weapon energy, it is still a very reliable tool for getting a breather in the combat and understanding which threats are something you need to prioritize. But like, I should not have been able to survive this encounter this easily. I would have had to restart this encounter so many times. But no, I just managed to scrape by so easily. That being said, though, this was not the same case for another bomb coming up, because there's a bomb on Founders Island that I consider to be one of the hardest bombs in this game when you're trying to do it no damage, because you have Mamba drones on higher elevations, and they are just sniping you, and they're putting pressure on you, and then you have all these other drones surrounding you, and the encounter really isn't in your favor. And, you know, this is very clever. I mean, I'm not considering it to be poor designs in the slightest at all. I think it's a legitimate challenge, and it's this one right here. So with this particular bomb, aim in this direction, because right there, the Mamba drones are scripted to be on those points, which is why they're allowed to appear out of thin air and not around the corner. So I'm just going to prioritize that one, and then I need to get some kind of breather to prioritize that Mamba drone on the bridge. And you see how he's putting pressure on me by firing those missiles, and I'm forced to use the Vulcan gun because they will hit me if I do not use the Vulcan gun on them. That is definitely a level of challenge involved with this particular bomb. But when I have enough charge, I'm going to deploy my EMP, and I'm going to take the time to deal with that Mamba drone. And one thing you need to realize about the missiles that the Mamba drone fires is that you can actually disable them using the EMP, which is a really cool design choice. I mean, I'm guessing what's happening is, because you're disabling the Mamba drone itself, the missiles are actually tied to the status of the Mamba drone. So if the Mamba drone is EMP, the missiles just disappear. But it's still cool nonetheless that you can use the EMP to bypass those missiles and not have to resort to a very rigid method of using the Vulcan gun against them. But we now have a couple of dragons and Mamba drones and Rattlers to deal with. And you've just got to make sure you're staying on the move constantly, and that you're using your ability sparingly so that you can use them to your advantage to get out of tight situations. But there's only a handful of enemies left, and that will be the end of this combat encounter. One of the hardest combat encounters in the game if you're trying to do it no damage. Obviously, when you're just not caring about no damage, the sequence isn't so bad. But I think without the health upgrades, and you're not doing it with bearing no damage in mind, this could still be pretty difficult. Like, this is definitely the kind of challenge you should be expecting from these kind of bombs, but I'm so glad that's not the case with a lot of these other bombs, because then I'd be wasting time restarting these encounters like crazy just to get no damage in order to make it suitable for the walkthrough. And you just have to wonder how Batman Arkham Videos does these bombs. Maybe he's using a tool. I mean, I doubt it though. And oh, that right there, that's bullshit. So I was trying to dodge into this turret by just pressing X multiple times. But the thing is that double tapping X is also the same ability for using the glide kick against enemies when you jump out of the Batmobile. So because the game has so much trouble prioritizing which animation it wants to do, it favored an unfavorable animation by making me jump out of the Batmobile rather than dodging. So I could have been shot just then. That was very dangerous. But I've dealt with that, and now I'm just going to deal with some of these checkpoints right over here. And these checkpoints are very simple. Just use the line launcher to get above the enemies and do the Fury takedown. And then we have to do Firefly side mission eventually, and that's when I take damage, and it's bullshit. But then, after that point, we do have the mission involving Hush. And Hush was the identity thief in Arkham City, and I've already discussed how poorly implemented Hush is into the story of Arkham Knight, and how his setup in Arkham City is meaningless, because he spent how much time in surgeries and just being on a table and just killing so many people just to walk past the receptionist in Batman Arkham Knight. Yeah, that is a pretty poor send-off to the identity thief from Batman Arkham City. And, you know, I initially didn't think anything of it. I didn't think anything of the identity thief's portrayal in Batman Arkham Knight, but I totally understand the criticism involved with the way Hush's introduction into Batman Arkham Knight feels very rushed and not properly thought out, and it doesn't pay off your investment into his character in Batman Arkham City. So, yeah, I totally agree with those fans that it's a pretty poor introduction, and really the only thing I like about it is just the tag team you get between Batman and Lucius. And really, I don't understand why they would reserve the identity thief for a side mission. I mean, he's directly attacking Lucius, and Lucius is your weapons handler. He's the guy supporting you by providing you with new armaments for the Batmobile. And he feels like a crucial character to the main story, but then you want to reserve him for a side mission? That doesn't make any sense at all. And if he's actually under threat by the identity thief during the time that you're rescuing the real Oracle, how is he able to provide you a second Batmobile? That doesn't make any sense at all. Like, why would they reserve him for a side mission when he should have been a part of the main story? That right there doesn't make any sense at all, and it's a great example of narrative dissonance that Batman Arkham Knight cleverly captures and I say cleverly like it's a good thing when it's actually a bad thing. It's just something that Batman Arkham Knight does very poorly. The ludonarrative dissonance that Batman Arkham Knight embraces is definitely indicative of a developer that is just done with the Arkham series. And you can tell based on what Godzilla Mendoza mentioned about a developer mentioning that they wanted Batman Arkham Knight to be the final game of the series, and because those thoughts bled into the actual structure of Batman Arkham Knight's story and gameplay, that's why Batman Arkham Knight is a very underwhelming entry in the Batman Arkham series, and it's my least favorite of the Arkham games. And I definitely need to do a reaction video to Godzilla Mendoza's videos on Arkham Knight when I get the chance, because I think they're worthy of it, because I have a lot of points that I do agree with when it comes to his views on Batman Arkham Knight. I mean, his views on the gameplay are very different. Like, he hates the Fear Takedown for whatever reason, when the Fear Takedown is one of the most strategic choices for Predator encounters ever, and it makes sense given that Batman has a new suit. And, you know, like, it gives the developers the opportunity to make the enemies a lot more lethal if they're making Batman a lot more capable in the Predator encounter. So why is he saying it's bad? Even Laser Z agrees with me that the Fear Takedown provides a lot of strategy for knowing when you're supposed to use it. But apparently Godzilla Mendoza doesn't agree, and I'll never understand that. But we have this watchtower right over here, and you'll actually be seeing me use the disruptor on the detective mode scanner, which I've never done before, because I've never found the need to do so. But there's not a lot of opportunities to be very creative here. The only creative things you can really do is just disrupt the medics pack and the detective mode scanner. Disabling that ammo crate doesn't really help here, because you'll need the voice synthesizer for it to work, which I guess could also work here. But yeah, I don't feel like the gadgets on this game offer a lot of creativity, because they've devoted a lot to the actual physical abilities of Batman. And, you know, they've changed up the enemy AI so that they're able to adapt to certain gadgets. It's definitely something that I feel is a criticism I have towards some of the Predator encounters in the main story, or even some of these Predator encounters in the side missions. And like I said before in the previous video, the side missions have better Predator encounters than the actual main story. And it's like they focused more on the open world activities than they did on the main story for Batman Arkham Knight, and it's pretty disappointing that that is the case, that they decided to favor that. But that right there, I disabled the medic's pack, and he's going to shock himself the moment he tries to resuscitate this guy. And you'll notice that there are a couple of moments where I'm trying to aim at this guy right here to disable his detective mode scanner, but I'm not aware that you're supposed to aim for the detective mode scanner itself. And I'm not too sure where it is, but it's actually on this guy's back right here. So there we go. It's disabled. And also, I don't understand how this works. So I'm currently in detective mode right now. He should be pulling out his scanner, but the detection on the scanner is ambiguous. And right there, he pulls it out. So why did it take him so long to actually pull out the detective mode scanner? I don't know why the detection is so ambiguous here, but since it's disabled, he's going to shock himself when he detects my location. And now we have 2 enemies left. And watch this, by the way. Watch the Arkham Knight's response to this. He knows I use that trick, yet he's recommending the enemies stay together as if I'm using silent takedowns against the enemies. So apparently, when you use the disruptor to incapacitate enemies, it classes as a silent takedown, and this causes the Arkham Knight to favor the counter to silent takedowns where he's making the enemies group together, which is not the recommended way for doing so. So, not too sure why they didn't bother accounting for that. But whatever, I'm glad the disruptors are overpowered. I mean, it has like 4 charges to it if you have all the upgrades. If it has limited capabilities compared to the voice synthesizer, then it makes sense why there's no counter for it. But now we have this checkpoint right over here. For this checkpoint, you'll just want to get on top and use the Batmobile to take out these drones. These drones are going to be situated in their idle positions, so you can use this as a chance to get the drop on them. Don't drop into the arena, just try to stay above them, and you'll be fine. And by the way, previously, I just did Man-Bat. You'll notice that I didn't include the whole moment where I'm escorting him back to JCPD, because there's no point in including that. It's all very simple. And a thought just occurred to me. So you know Killer Croc and how his condition, it seems like he's exhibiting crocodile traits given the fact that he has atavism, so it's practically a genetic mutation. Well, for the Man-Bat side mission, Batman actually uses Langstrom's technology to manufacture a cure for his condition. He's able to isolate the Man-Bat signature from the human DNA so that he's able to revert Langstrom back to his human form. So why is it that there wasn't a similar mechanism used for Killer Croc in order to actually revert him back to normal? I mean, I know the warden said that his condition is amplified by trauma, but even still, though, all the trauma did was just bring more of the crocodile signature as like a physical phenotype. So therefore, if Batman were to use Langstrom's technology to manufacture a cure for Croc, it could theoretically work if he actually had the DNA of a crocodile that could be identical to the DNA that's expressed by Killer Croc. That's an interesting thought right there. I wonder if you guys thought the same thing as well when you were doing Man-Bat side mission. You just came off of Killer Croc's boss fight. I think that could have been an interesting dynamic event for actually influencing Killer Croc's condition if you actually did Man-Bat side mission before. I mean, you can still do it even though you did Man-Bat side mission after Killer Croc, but I think it would be a very interesting way to close Killer Croc's character rather than just simply imprisoning him again. You know, like, I'm not a big fan of how a lot of villains in the Batman Arkham series never really get some kind of closure. I mean, Mr. Freeze is the only villain that gets closure, but with the other villains, Batman just puts them into prison, and that's it. And I'm guessing he only did it this way just so his side characters can actually handle them from now on. But it's not like he set in stone the proper steps to take to actually build upon his legacy. He didn't lay out these kind of steps to his comrades at all when he actually decided to initiate the Nightfall Protocol. So what is the whole point of that? Again, it's a pretty poor send-off to all those side characters and villains in Batman Arkham Knight. And I think that's all I'm going to say about it at the moment until somehow I come up with more ideas to really complement this tangent in the later videos. But we're currently chasing Firefly, so as I mentioned, I go to do the takedown on Firefly, which I do, but I end up taking damage somehow from him shooting his flamethrower into a wall. And it's bullshit that occurred. And that was the final blow I had on him. I practically ended the fight right there. I didn't care. That should be no damage in my book. I don't care. I still hate what they did with Firefly in Batman Arkham Knight. Firefly was such a cool villain in Batman Arkham Origins, and he hasn't attacked Gotham for 10 years, and all he's doing is just burning fire stations and just throwing insults at Batman while he's chasing him. Talk about underwhelming, like, talk about a complete 180 in epicness. He goes from being an epic villain in Batman Arkham Origins to just a throwaway character in Batman Arkham Knight. And Rocksteady had 4 years of development, I'd say, or did they actually start development of Batman Arkham Knight sometime before Batman Arkham City? How could they settle on this? Just how could they do so little with a lot of time on their hands? It doesn't make any sense. It really doesn't make any sense at all. But then again, with my experience with new Capcom and with their complete blundering of Resident Evil Village, it's definitely enlightened me to the whole idea of how the gaming model works, in that no matter how much time you dedicate to a product, there's always going to be underwhelming designs, because the boardroom got together and they decided on this model out of nowhere, or there were financial issues and the like. And that's why we get these kind of moments where they didn't devote enough time to these kind of characters. And by the way, there was that damage you saw when I did that takedown on Firefly. Completely bullshit, because for whatever reason, he fired his flamethrower into a wall. But I've done it, and now I'm just going to continue on from there. So there's a firefighter. He's right by Wayne Tower, so I'm just going to do the fear takedown on these guys. A lot of them have guns, so I nearly get caught by one guy with a gun. But he misses, because the gunners are pretty fair in combat. Like, look at that. He had the perfect opportunity to hit me, but he missed. I'm glad that the enemies on this game can miss. I'm glad they have a sense of fallibility to them, rather than being infallible. If there's one game series that definitely knows how to do guys with guns, it's the Batman Arkham series, because the guys with the guns are so fair and well-designed. If only games like Resident Evil 6 and the Yakuza series could actually learn from this game on how to do guys with guns, because those guys with the guns are so broken in Resident Evil 6 and in the Yakuza series. Of course, Yakuza is way worse than Resident Evil 6. At least in Resident Evil 6, there is some kind of design put in place where you can use certain mechanics to your advantage to deal with the guys with guns. But in Yakuza, that game is a brawler series, and it wants to favor guys with guns. So broken, really broken, and then they spam you like crazy. They spam dodge like crazy as well with certain boss fights where guns actually become a factor to consider. And the combat just falls apart so much with Yakuza. And I'd rather not think about that game series, because I hate that game series. I just want it out of my head. and I don't see myself going back to it. I mean, as much as I was doing that walkthrough for Yakuza Kiwami, it'll probably be a while before I ever mustered the urge to even do content for Yakuza Kiwami. Because as much as I did leave off from Chapter 6, I believe, Chapter 7, I don't even know what I'm going to be saying for Chapter 7 of Yakuza Kiwami. But let's not talk about that right now. We're doing this main story quest right here where we're taking on these tanks. And I had a really stupid moment with the Cobra Drone section. So, for whatever reason, even though I made a Cobra Drone a friendly, it targeted an enemy, and I was right near the enemy. I was not in this enemy's line of sight, but for some reason, a target lock HUD appeared on my screen, and I took damage from nothing. So it almost gave the impression that my friendly Cobra Drone prioritized me and damaged me. What the fuck is that about? So apparently, if you are in a situation where you have your friendly Cobra Drone dealing with an enemy Cobra Drone, do not go anywhere near them. Because even though your friendly Cobra Drone is supposed to be prioritizing the other enemy, there are times where it prioritizes you, and I've saved it as a blooper at the end of this video. But I'm still committing to using the CPU virus to hack this Cobra Drone, and again, it takes 2 secondary weapon energy charges to actually use the CPU virus against these Cobra drones. There's only about 4 of these Cobra drones left. I mean, it's including my friendly Cobra drone. You'd think they'd actually adjusted where it only includes the enemy Cobra drones, but apparently not. Whatever, it doesn't matter. But once we've done this Cobra Drone encounter, this will be the end of this video, and the Cloud Burst will be unleashed, and we'll continue the City of Fear arc in the next part of this video, which will definitely include the Cloud Burst boss fight, which I have a really good strategy for the Cloud Burst boss fight, and you've probably seen it on my channel. It's titled Easiest Way to Beat the Cloud Burst boss, and it involves doing Ring Around the Rosie with the Cloud Burst, and just using one particular building in the middle of Bleak Island to just loop this guy and stop him from using his overdrive in order to catch you, because when the Arkham Knight's Cloudburst gets overdrive, when you shoot one of the coolant lines, you will go into a whole chase sequence where he just omnisciently knows where you are, and he is so good at puffing through the environment and hitting you that it's entirely random if you do not use the strategy that I'll be using for that boss fight. But you'll see what I mean when I get to the next part of this walkthrough. That is the end of this combat encounter. Here is the blooper right here where I get shot by my friendly Cobra tank out of nowhere. And this will conclude this part of the walkthrough. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.